Well, hello, and welcome to the Constitution Study. My name is Paul Engel, and I am glad you could join me. We are here to return the Constitution to we the people. On today's episode, I want to take a look at some news that's been going around and look at it from a constitutional standpoint. But first, I want to thank you for joining me. If this is the first time you've heard this, I'm hoping the topic we've got you found interesting, exciting, and was willing to come listen to what I had to say about it. And if you're a returning listener, thank you very much. It's going to take work. It's going to take dedication for us to return the Constitution back to we the people. And that starts with education. So I hope you'll take some time, subscribe to the podcast at Apple Podcasts, and come back to hear more about what we are learning about our Constitution. Education. You know, I pick a lot on the educational system, especially when it comes to its utter failure in teaching not only the words of the Constitution, but the concepts that are behind it. And, you know, it's sad, but we shouldn't be depending on the government to teach us anyway. They aren't good at it. They've made a mess of it. So I'm glad you're going to spend some time with me today. Hopefully you'll find some stuff here interesting, and let's get right into it. So many of you may have heard about this judge that has opined. They've given an opinion. I don't call it a ruling because judges don't issue rulings. But she's issued an opinion that Donald Trump, by blocking users from his Twitter account, the @RealTrump Twitter account, has violated the First Amendment rights of several people. Now, if you're like me, when I first heard about this, my first reaction was, oh, great, more judicial overreach. Another example of judges saying, we don't like this, we don't like what's happened, and we're just going to go after it. But I'm going to do, I did, and I'm going to go through with you what I recommend we all do, and that is don't just look at the headline, look at what's actually going on. So what I'm going to use is an article from the New York Times. You can find it. I'll put the link in the show notes. And I thought it was a very good, even-handed, without getting too deep in the craziness, explanation of what was the opinion was actually about. And I hope you stick around to the end, because there was a twist to this that really caught me by surprise. A good surprise, but it really caught me by surprise. So let's start with the suit, Knight Institute versus Trump. See, there were these 7 people, and they engaged the Knight First Amendment Institute to sue Donald Trump because he had blocked their access to his Twitter account. Now, if you're not that familiar with Twitter, I'm not going to get deep into it, but basically, President Trump, as I'm sure you've heard, tweets. He sends out these messages, and he often uses his verified or real Twitter account to put out this information. Apparently, according to these 7 people in the Knight Institute, several of them were blocked, meaning not only could they not respond to his account, but they were not given access to his account anymore. It's rather like, barring the door. You're not allowed in anymore. You're not allowed to participate in the discussion on that account. If you want more information on Twitter, I'm sure there's some really good articles about it, but that's as far as you want to go. The idea is the president said, no, you cannot comment directly on the tweets from this account anymore. And, again, my first thought was, well, guess what? The First Amendment doesn't guarantee the right to an audience. Yes, they have the right to speak, but does President Trump, is he required to not only listen, but to give them a forum? But that's where getting a little deeper into it started to make a lot of sense. Because the real question isn't, does Mr. Trump have the right to block people from his personal Twitter account? But is Mr. Trump using his personal Twitter account for government business? And that's an important distinction. You see, if you or I decide, people are attacking us on Twitter and we don't want to hear them anymore, we don't want to give them a voice anymore, we can block them on our account. But if Mr. Trump is using this account as president, in other words, he's in his role as POTUS, President of the United States, and he is conducting government business, in this case, by communicating to the people as president across his account, is that account still his personal account? Or is it now truly a public forum? Because if it's a public forum, well, then it falls under the First Amendment's restrictions on what the government can and cannot do. Think of it this way. Can a public official bypass the legal requirements for government communication by using a private account? Imagine the fun and games that would happen in Washington if all you had to do to hide government, political, business communication was to, I'm going to do a private Twitter account. Well, if it's a private Twitter account, how about a private Facebook account or a private Instagram account or a private email account? Or it goes on and on. See, if you remember, it wasn't all that long ago, there was an uproar because people found out that the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, had used a private email account to conduct State Department business. Now, everybody focuses on the fact that it was a private email server that sat in her basement. But from a legal standpoint, where the server was has one set of connotations, but the question is, could she legally conduct State Department business on a private email account that wasn't covered under the same government records retention requirements? Now, if Mrs. Clinton cannot bypass federal records laws by using a private email server, should Mr. Trump be able to bypass constitutional restriction on people's communication by using a private Twitter account rather than his official one? See, the problem here actually was created by President Trump and no one else. It was President Trump that used his personal Twitter account rather than his official one to make presidential announcements. While private citizen Mr. Trump certainly has the right to block from his private Twitter account anybody he wants, but by using the account to conduct presidential business, it is now a public forum. Therefore, it has to be treated that way. So I want to go a little bit. There's another question that came up, and what did President Trump actually violate when he blocked these individuals' access to his account? Now, I've heard a lot of reports. They talk about, freedom of speech. A few people even mentioned freedom of the press. I find it interesting that I believe the judge's opinion speaks specifically of the First Amendment, but not which right protected under the First Amendment. But the First Amendment reads, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Since government cannot restrict speech or press, this account, which is now a public forum, the government, in the form of President Trump, cannot legally block access to it. Trump can ignore anything posted to the account. He can mute people. He can just have his staff weed out those messages. He doesn't have to listen to them. But he has opened a forum of discussion for the government on this Twitter account. He cannot legally prevent people from participating. That would be a violation of their speech and their press rights. But there's more. You see, if you continue in the First Amendment, not only does it say Congress shall make no law prohibiting the right to free speech and freedom of the press, but also to petition the government for a redress of grievances. See, by using this account to make public announcements, blocking a person's ability to reply in the exact same forum not only abridges their freedom of speech and press, but also their ability to petition the government for a redress of grievance. These people have a very legitimate right here. I believe this is rightly found, but there's a twist. And I love this twist because I seem to see it so rarely. See, unlike many recent judicial opinions, and trust me, there are many of them, my wife will tell you, I go a little nuts when I hear some of them. This Judge Naomi Reese Buchwald, I believe is how it's pronounced, she used a level of judicial restraint we rarely see in the media nowadays. See, what she did was she didn't do something. She did not issue an injunction. She did not order the president to unblock these users. Apparently, she recognized that the Constitution does not give the judicial branch the authority to order the executive branch to do anything. This is known as a separation of powers. I probably will do a podcast episode on that because there's a lot of misunderstanding about the separation of powers. But in this case, the judge apparently understood her limitations. Reading from the opinion, it says, quote, because no government official is above the law, and because all government officials are presumed to follow the law, once the judiciary has said what the law is, we must assume that the president and Schiavino will remedy the blocking we held to be unconstitutional, close quote. And I apologize if I mispronounced that person's name, Schiavino, I believe. See, I do have an issue with this part of the opinion. The Constitution does not give the federal judiciary the power to say, quote, what the law is. Nobody is perfect. So it's a very good decision. If we read Article 3, Section 2, Paragraph 1 of the Constitution says, the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution. If we go back to, well, what is a judicial power? If we read from Webster's 1828 dictionary, judiciary is a noun. It says that branch of government which is concerned in the trial and determination of controversies between parties. Nowhere does it say determining what a law is or isn't. See, the judge was properly exercising her judicial powers. See, the judge had a dispute between parties. The Knight Institute on one hand and Mr. Trump on the other. And she determined that what Mr. Trump had done did not pass constitutional muster. So I would say, in general, this is a good decision by this judge. Yes, there is a small issue, but in the idea of let's getting closer to actual constitutional law and having the government act in a constitutional way, this to me is a good step in the right direction. I am happy that the judge recognized some of the limitations the Constitution puts on the judicial branch. I hope she'll realize all of them, but I give her a lot of points for that. I also hope President Trump will recognize the correctness of this decision. The understanding that once you start using a form of communication for presidential, governmental use, it falls under the restrictions of the Constitution on that, of what the government can and cannot do, restricting free speech, restricting freedom of the press, restricting the opportunity of people to petition their government for a redress of grievance is not allowed. So I hope you found this interesting. Like I said, it's one of those where I started out one way, but once I got into it a bit, I went another way. Please give me your comments, ask your questions, go to the website, constitutionstudy.com, look under podcasts, or you can go constitution.com/podcast. This will be episode 4, and you can make a comment. What do you think? Did I get it right? Did I miss something? Ask a question. I think it's important that we have a lively and productive discussion about these types of issues. Not simply take polarized side, not take teams, but let's discuss what really is going on. And I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you have found something that you think I am wrong, post it. Let everybody know. I want to hear it. I want to see it. Because if I'm wrong, I want to know about it. But I also ask that you read and you listen to what is actually there and not simply have a knee-jerk reaction that says, I don't like the judiciary, or I like Trump, or I don't like Trump. That's not what this is about. We want to have a logical, rational, reasoned discussion about the powers and the limitations between the branches of government. I'm also going to ask you, join the mailing list. You'll see on the menu the opportunity to join the mailing list. I've got some stuff in the works that we'll start using the mailing list sooner with essays I may be publishing and other events I may be involved with. So please join that. I want you to be involved in the discussion. Ask questions. There's a form up there where you can ask a question. Who knows? Maybe I'll have your question on the podcast. Maybe I'll even invite you to join me, to join via Skype, and we'll have an interview and discuss your question real time. I want to thank you for coming to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll be back. See, this is the type of work that we as citizens need to do. We need to look at what's being done by our government. We need to analyze it by the standards of the Constitution, what the actual words on paper say. This is how we return the Constitution to we, the people. So again, I want to thank you for listening. I hope to see you again. I hope you return to the Constitution study. I hope you'll help us all return the Constitution to we, the people. And I would like to thank you, and God bless we, the people of the United States of America.